Good morning, everyone. We have the privilege of studying the Haftarah for Parashat Nasso this week, which is the Haftarah from Shoftim, from the Judges, beginning in chapter 13, chapter 2. Steve, do you have a stone chumash in front of you?
I don't, but I could grab one.
No, it's okay. I just want to make sure.
One. It's 1181 if you look.
1181?
Yeah.
Thank you. 1181. And as we hopefully, well, this is, a rhetorical question at this point, but hopefully we all know that this is Shoftim. Shoftim are part of the early prophets, and therefore what we would expect is a story, a narrative. After all of Shoftim are these vignettes of stories of leaders, in many ways tragic leaders, right? The point of Shoftim is to sort of highlight the need for sustained, continued good leadership, and the lack thereof. That's part of the prophetic message of Shoftim as a whole, as a section, as a unit. And Shmuel, excuse me. This story is particularly the story of Shimshon, of Samson, or at least forecasting his birth. And he is a complicated figure. We're not going to spend so much time talking about him, actually, because he's not really around in our Haftarah. We sort of tell about him. But he's a complicated figure, and one that requires us to think about what roles what role he plays, what role the prophet is trying to convey about him. I had a friend who gave a sermon on something about Shimshon, and one of the people came to him afterwards and said, I think I misunderstood you. It sounded like you were saying that he was, a complicated, nuanced, potentially flawed character. And really that fit into a theme of all of Shoftim. And of course, that can't be the case. My friend's like, no, that's exactly what I said. And that's the truth. It's the truth about Shimshon, about Samson. He's a very complicated, nuanced figure, and that's part of the theme, much broader in Shoftim, that there are leaders that are complicated and nuanced and and challenged, and that's part of the challenge of Shoftim as a whole. Our story, particularly our Haftarah, particularly focuses on the part where a malach, a messenger from God, comes and tells Shimshon's parents, particularly his mother, about the impending birth of Shimshon and the rules that will be required of him. And right off the bat, those rules include the special Nazirite laws, because he is a Nazir. And that obviously fits in very nicely to our Parsha, because our Parsha talks about Nazirut, introduces us the concept of that. Obviously, there's probably a little bit more message beneath there, but that sits out so much so that if you recall, one of the famous questions or the popular questions in our Parsha is the juxtaposition between Nazir and what other practice? Anyone know? What section immediately precedes the section of Nazir? I'll give you a hint. It's chapter 5, verse 11 in Bamidbar. Vaydaber Hashem Moshe lemor. Moshe spoke to God. God spoke to Moshe, saying, Daber al bnei Yisrael, speak to the Jewish people, v'amarta lehem, and speak to them, ish ish, kisteh shishto umal bo mal. When a person suspects his wife of being unfaithful and essentially goes through this whole process, it's the famous process of sota, of the woman who is secludes inappropriately. A lot of times people look at the story of Sota and they say, oh, look, it's discrimination against women and just suspicion. It's not true. If you look at the actual process of Sota, what starts with a suspicion, but ends with verifiable facts of wrongdoing, of seclusion between a man and a woman who are not married, which is a violation of halacha, and just, we understand today, violation of like smart judgment. And so that's what triggers this more. And especially after the person was warned, do not seclude with this person, and yet they still did. It's not that the people are totally innocent, although it's a complicated, also nuanced section of Torah. So one of the, why am I bringing all this up? Once this Haftarah is chosen, or vice versa, for this whole conversation, there is a comparison that Sota, that Eshet Manoach also is, that Shimshon's mom is also maybe a Sota, and therefore blessed with a child for that. And it's, let's read a little bit more, but hold on to that image for a second, because we'll come back, we'll justify that a little bit more. But Ish Echad, there's a man from the house of Sarah, Umimishpachat Hadani, from the tribe of Dan, Ushmo Manoach, and his name was Manoach. V'ishto Akara below Yalada, and his wife was Akara, was barren, and had not born a child. Right off the bat, we sort of set up a pretty common refrain, right? We know, we're familiar with many righteous women in the Tanakh who are barren, right? That sort of sets up a refrain. What's interesting, we're not giving her name. Not giving her name. Over and over again, people refer to her as Eshet Manoach, right? And that's really the way it describes over and over again. But there actually is a name for her, according to some. If you look in Divrei Hayamim, in Chronicles, there's a woman who is described from the stock of Yehuda, of Judah, and marries into Dan. And that is the name, what's her name? Hold on. Hatzla, let's see. Hatzlaponi. Hard word to pronounce, hard name to pronounce. Maybe that's why she's referred to Eshet Manoach over and over again. Hey Tzadi Lamed Pei Vav Nun Yud. And our rabbis identify her from the character. She's part of the Mishpacha, the family of Caleb ben Yefuneh from the tribe of Yehuda, and identify her as the mother of Shimshon. Why is her name Hatzlafoni? Because she saw a malach, the story we're about to see, she saw an angel, Poneh ro'eh et ha-malach, that she saw the malach, and that's the word sel, like the image of the shade, is really a reference to the shade of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, an emissary of God, which is the malach. Why then is her name spelled with two lameds? Don't we normally spell shade with one lamed? Sel lamed, tzadi lamed. So continues the midrash, because she saw a malach twice, so she gets two lameds. So there are a lot of these different etymologies sort of that build out to this. I just wanted to reference, we're going to call her Eshet Manoach because that's what the text that we're studying refers to her as, the wife of Manoach. But she does have a name, according to some. That name is found in Divrei Yamim. And on my mind, God willing, August will come soon, and we'll have a healthy baby. Maybe that will be an interesting name if it's a girl. Maybe not.
Speak to your wife.
I haven't really cleared it with Miriam. So I would say it probably won't be, but you never know. Someone will give you odds for that. Let's go on. So what happens? Vayar malach Hashem el ha'isha, an angel of God, a messenger of God appears to the women, Vayomer Allah, and says to her, Hinena at akara, behold, you are a barren woman, below yaladet, you haven't given birth, varat ve'alad bed, and you will give birth, and you will conceive, and you will have a child, a son. V'ata, and now, pay attention, here are the rules. Al tishti yayin v'shechar. Don't drink wine or any other wine-derived beverage or intoxicating beverage. V'al tochli kol tameh. And don't eat anything impure. What does that mean, don't eat anything impure?
Anything that a Nazarite can't eat.
Says Helen, as the Malbim and Rashi and the Gemara all explains. What does that mean, don't eat anything impure? It means don't eat anything a Nazareth can eat. Right, that a Nazir can't eat. The question, what can a Nazir not eat that hasn't been included by wine and intoxicating beverages?
Mm.
Does that have to do with kashrut?
So 1 second. So the answer to that question could be grapes. We haven't mentioned grapes here. A Nazir is not even allowed to eat grapes. But we'll see that that's not such a good answer. Well, we'll come back to that. Says Renana, what does that mean? It means kashrut. Kol tameh means don't eat anything that is not kosher. What does that highlight? It just shows how poor the religious observance of the Jewish people are during this time of Shoftim, how low it's sunk, that the Nazir needs to say, eat kosher food.
You have to say that, right?
That's one explanation. The third explanation is the Radak. The Radak means don't eat anything that can make you impure. Right? Don't eat anything that's impure that will make you impure. Which is an interesting piece of case law to begin with about can you eat something that will make you impure, but we're not going to deal with that right now. That's a separate taharat and tumah ritual impurity question. Well, I just want to come back to the point about the eating grapes because we'll see in a second, not so clear exactly. Behold, you'll give birth to a son. And what you have to do, Mora lo yaleh al rosho, don't cut his hair. Don't let a razor cut his hair. Ki nazir elokim yahanar min habeten, as the child will be a nazir to God from the womb. V'hu yachel leoshia et Yisrael miyad haplishtim, and he shall come to deliver the plishtim, to deliver the Jews from the hands of the Plishtim. He'll begin to save the people. Savior. Great news, right? Source number, continuing on, verse 6. Vatomer Haisha, Vatavo Haisha. And the woman went, Vatomer Leisha, and she said to her husband, Lamor, saying, Ish Helokim ba Eli, a servant, an angel of God came to me, Umareo Kemare Malach Helokim, and his image was like the image of God, of the angel of God. Right? What does an angel look like? I don't know, but because I see it, I know it when I see it, right? It looked like an angel of God. Nora me'od, very frightening, very frightening. And I didn't ask him, who at Shemo lo higidli. I didn't ask him where he came from or what his name was. Right? I didn't do much investigation. I was afraid. Vayomer li, he said to me, Hine hara, you will be conceived, v'yoladed ben, and have a child, and don't drink wine, don't eat any tameh, because your child will be a nazir, min habeten, from birth, ad yomoto, until his death, right? Vayatar Manoach el Hashem, Manoach prayed to God and said, send the guy back. I want to understand, I want to meet him, right? And why? What's the point? Yorenu mana said lanar hayulad. So we should know how to act with the child who's born. So let's take what questions come up from just reading this. Does Manoach seem to trust his wife?
No.
No. Brett, what's he asking for a second visit here? So some explain that he didn't trust his wife. And this is sort of like, is Manoach a good character or a complicated character or a bad character? Right? He didn't trust his wife. Maybe she's confused. Maybe she was lightheaded. Maybe she made it up. But, others suggest, no, if you look specifically at his requests, Manaseh lanar hayulad, what should be done? How should we act with the child that will be born? Meaning, we know what to do before he's born, but how should we raise him, right? Is there any special instruction he should have? Meaning, we want more information, right? That's a possibility, right? Good or bad would be that. But let's go back to verse number 7. What's the most important thing that the angel told Eshet Manoach? If you were summarizing from verse 3 and verse 4 and verse 5, what would be the top 2 things you would tell them?
You'll bear a son.
Great. And then there's one other. What's his son destined to do?
He'll be a Nazar.
No, what's he destined to do? What's he going to do?
Save Israel.
He's going to be the savior of the Jewish people. It's a pretty big deal. Yeah, he shouldn't eat wine. He shouldn't drink whatever. He shouldn't cut his hair. But if I had to, what I think about, there's that joke, that collect call commercial where they call from the hospital. You want to collect call from, hi, it's a girl, everyone's good, something like that. We had a baby, it's a girl. You have to be a certain age to even know what collect calls are anymore. But right, what's the main point? She doesn't even mention that to him, right? Verse number 7, right? She doesn't even mention to him. Why doesn't she mention to him that he's going to save the Jewish people?
Maybe she doesn't trust him. I don't know. It's weird.
Well, maybe or maybe she doesn't trust the tremendous thing that God has said to her, that he's going to save Israel. Maybe she's cynical about that. How could he save a son from my womb? How could he save the Jewish people from the Plishtim?
Right. That's a great question. Maybe that's her thought. So there are a couple of questions here, a couple of answers here. And by the way, well, let's come back to that. We'll answer it now. So a couple of suggestions here. According to the collection of Chachamim from Sarfat, Tosfot mi Sarfat, a collection of medieval commentaries on Chumash from like the French area, from France. They say, no, he did tell her. I'm sorry, she did tell him when she says blah blah blah, right? I'm sorry, when she says this, it ends with blah blah blah, sort of, and etc. and tells him the rest of it, right? He did tell her, she did tell him, it's just not in the text. That's one answer. The Malbim, on the other hand, the Malbim on the other hand asks exactly this question and suggests that the reason why she doesn't tell him is because they didn't want to announce it too much. They didn't want it to be, hold on a second. Let me make sure I'm saying this right. Right, so she's worried, says the Malbim. I just want to make sure I'm saying this right. Ki acher shaplishtim yishma'u, that the Plishtim will hear, as yireh pen tiva da hadavar v'yargo et hanolad. Right? They'll kill the child. The Plishtim are going to hear that there's a child that's going to be born that's going to save the Jewish people, begin to roll back the Plishtim's component, the Plishtim's rule. She doesn't want it to get found out. She wants to keep that a secret, right? She wants to keep that a secret, and therefore she is not telling anyone. She doesn't trust her husband. I don't know, right? They say a secret is something you tell
him. That's
right. A secret is something you tell one person at a time, right? So she's worried it's going to spread. The only way they make sure a secret doesn't get told is by not telling it. So she doesn't tell him. That's the Malbim. That's the Malbim. I'll give you one other suggestion. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say what she does tell him is that he will be a Nazirite from the womb until the day of his death. And it's interesting because Hashem doesn't say anything about the day of his death.
That's the third question we have to ask ourselves, right? Why does she add this until the day of her death?
Why does she add this? Or maybe she has some sense that the Plishtim ultimately will destroy him, which is what happens, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think so. The Malbim answers that question and says, I think it's assumed that it will be till the end of his life. But the Malach doesn't say that because the Malach knows the future, that before the end of his life, he will complete or really profane, break his Nazirut. That's what the Malbim says. That it's implied, she got the message. She's not misunderstanding. The Malach implies it should be until the day he dies. Why doesn't the Malach explicitly say that? Because the Malach knows that that won't be the case. But really, that's the intention. She's totally dead on. She understands what she's supposed to be saying. As they say, she got the message, right? The other answer, so why doesn't she tell him that he's going to be the Moshiach? He's going to save the Jewish people? Number one is she did, right? We just don't know. The Navi doesn't need to tell us that. That's the Mefarshim from Sarfat. Number two is the Malbim, is that she really didn't tell him. She wanted to keep it a secret, to keep her son safe. And number three, another answer, which I've seen written a couple places more modernly, is sort of think about where we are, right? The Plishtim have been oppressing Jewish people for 40 years, right? Now she gets a message that sort of war, that challenge, that strife, those, think about it in sort of a contemporary context, right? There's a war going on in the world, or God forbid there was a war in Israel. And let's say you were told by God, the salvation is coming as a baby. One day they're going to solve the problem. So what does that mean? Let's say he's an ambitious 18-year-old. So that means, what you're going to tell people? In 18 years from now, this is going to be solved? How many people are still be around by then? Right? Sort of, it's not such exciting news. It's a little bit of a doubter, right? Don't worry. God plans to save the people, but in 20 years from now, right? So it could be that she's not so excited about that fact, right? I'm saying it's a great thing in the world. He's going to save the Jewish people. It could be that she didn't interpret it that way. It could be that that's a really hard thing to tell people, right? You think redemption is going to come tomorrow. You sort of think about this in like the political frame, right? Oh, don't worry. If there's a new generation of politicians, they'll be able to change the rhetoric, this and that. That's what takes a really long time. That takes a really long time. I think what part of what that could be is we're describing in Shoftim. So that's a complicated time, right? God's not willing to do the miraculous miracle for the people like this. Just fix it. They're not deserving of it. What God's potentially telling people is, I'm building into the works redemption. Hopefully you'll deserve it by then, right? If not, maybe something else will happen, right? It's sort of like building a foundation for a future building project. It's not here yet. And perhaps that's why she doesn't emphasize it for exactly that reason. Who knows, right? 3 answers. Continues on, so what happens? And by the way, what else does she not tell? What else does she not tell over here? This was a little harder to find. I wouldn't have noticed it on my own right away. What's the first thing he tells her? Hine na ad akara, you are barren. Meaning, the Midrash says that she was upset at Manoach, and that Manoach, she thought Manoach was the reason why they didn't have any children. And it was an issue with him. And the malach is essentially saying it's really you're the barren woman. The only reason why I'm highlighting this is she obviously then doesn't want to go tell that to Manoach, right? But what's interesting is, as the story plays out, continuing, Manoach prays, please let there be another, let him come back. We want to talk to him some more. Verse number 9, Vayishmael kim b'kol Manoach. God listens to Manoach somewhat. I say somewhat because Vayavo malach Elokim od el ha'isha. The angel comes back to the woman, not to the man. Manoach's not there. And she's sitting in the field. Manoach isha, and Manoach, her husband, ein ima, is not with her. Meaning Manoach says, I want to talk to the guy, right? Come back, tell the guy to come back when I'm here. And he comes back, but she's not here. Continues on. But to Maher Haisha, the woman runs. Vataratz vataged leisha, the woman runs to get her husband. Vatomer elav, and she says to him, Hinei nira Eli haish asher ba bayom Eli. The man came back. He just came back. So they go greet him, skipping a little bit. Vayomer, verse 13. Vayomer malach Hashem el Manoach. The angel says to Manoach, Mikol asher amarti al haisha tishamer, whatever I said to the woman, I warned her about, listen to. Mikol asher yetzei mi gefen hayayin lo tochal, whatever comes out from grapes or wine, don't drink. Yain, I'm sorry, yeah, the yain v'shechar, don't drink any wine or intoxication. B'chol tum'ah lo tochal, don't eat anything impure. So this sort of hurts our, Helen, this hurts our other piece. If we said that he keeps over here this requirement, don't eat anything impure. If we say that impure means things that a Nazir can't eat, well, what can't a Nazir not eat? Before we excluded the grapes, but here grapes are mentioned. So it's unclear exactly what exactly this lo tochal hamei, don't eat impure food is. Kol asher tzvizeh tishmor, listen to everything that I commanded. What doesn't the malach tell him? That's the end of his speech. What doesn't the malach tell him?
That he'll be the savior.
Number one, he'll be the savior, and number two, that she's an akara, right? Says the Midrash in Vayikra Rabbah, Gadol Hashalom, great is peace. Shidvaro Haktuvim Lashon Davoy bin Nevi'im, because the text spoke falsely in the prophets for shalom, for peace. Bishvil lahatil shalom ben ish leisha, to preserve and create peace between husband and wife. Shenemar, as it says, V'hina at akara, behold, you are a akara, aval, you are barren, aval Manoach lo amar kain. But Manoach, the angel didn't repeat that. Ella, rather, mikol asher amarti alisha tishamer. Whatever I told the wife, whatever I told your wife, the woman, be careful of. Meaning, if she wants to tell you, she's welcome to tell you. If she doesn't want to tell you, I'm not going to tell you. Meaning, he leaves that out. He leaves that out. Why? Shalom ben ish leisha, to preserve peace between husband and wife. Midrash Rabbah in source 12. Hodia shehi akara. He told her that she was barren, v'achen lo yalda, that's why she didn't give birth. Why did he have to tell her in the first place? Idei lasim shalom beina ubein ba'ala, to put peace between her and her husband, the fish haita, because she was saying, mitromemet al manoach ba'ala al shelo haita yoladet. She was saying that it's his fault that that he's barren. So the Navi tells us that the angel came and told her this piece of information, not to make her feel bad, but just so that she wouldn't keep ragging on her husband, right? So that they would have peace between them. So they spoke extra truth to her. And then continues the midrash of Masha Amra La Hina Na At Akara, but what it told to her that she was barren, Lo Galta Lo didn't reveal it to him, to Manoach, Shelo Ratzta Legalo Kilkula, because it didn't want to divulge her problem, her insecurity, meaning it was a double-edged action here. He wanted to tell her that she was barren, so she wouldn't blame Manoach, but didn't tell Manoach, so he wouldn't blame her. All this to preserve peace between husband and wife. All right. Let's just point out one more piece. This whole piece about her. Why doesn't if Manoach asks for the prophet to the Navi, not the Navi, excuse me, for the angel to show to him, why does it appear back to her? Why this whole long piece? And if the intention was never to appear to Manoach, so when she went away to get Manoach and came back, he shouldn't be there anymore. But the fact that he was still there willing to talk to Manoach, why didn't you just appear to Manoach in the first place? So says the Midrash Rabbah as well. Why do they do that? To highlight the fact that she was so righteous. Highlight the fact that she was so righteous, that she was the one who would understand, and so she became the conduit for Manoach. And explains the Midrash even more. Vatar, V'tamahera Isha Vataratz, that she went and she was quick. Malame Chekol Maset Tzadikim B'mehirut. This is a sign that all righteous deeds, all the deeds of the righteous should be done quickly, meaning she was righteous and she was rushed, and therefore that's what we're saying as well. Mikol She'ar Marti Al Isha, L'chale Kavod L'Isha, to give honor to the woman, L'chavava Be'enav, and to make her beloved in his eyes, meaning to highlight, elevate her role. And what's interesting, what leads this out to be, and we sort of story with this, and we'll end with this, based on her name. On the one hand, she's unnamed. It's Eshet Manoach. On the other hand, the text specifically is set up to highlight the fact that she plays a more critical role than he does. There are a lot of interesting features to this, and the contrast and the similarities here and in other places. We didn't get to talk about that today. We sort of think about the story of Shmuel and his mother begging for a child, where she clearly is not requesting one, at least not explicitly in the text. But we're not going to get into some of those comparisons right now. So what we saw most of the story so far, and what we've covered some of these questions of the pshat, of exactly how the story goes. Is Manoach a good character or a bad character or a complicated character? Is Eshet Manoach, is the wife, a good character or complicated character? Seems like she's definitely seems to be the consensus is she's a much better character. And all of this leads up to the really interesting question about what type of character is Shimshon, right? Is he a righteous character? Is he a challenged character? He's a character that is riddled in dichotomies, right? Not in our Haftarah, but just think about it. He is a hero with an incredible strength, an invincible hero with a very clear weakness. Cut his hair and he has no strength, right? He is a story of a man so strong with such a strong weakness. He is a man who is, on the one hand, signaled out as a Nazir to be saintly and to focus on God. On the other hand, we read of him intermarrying, sleeping with prostitutes, debasing himself. He is the most morally corrupt Nazir we read of, right? So it's a really interesting combination, to say the least, which should leave us to pause and think about these different pieces. So we'll stop here, and we'll wish you all a wonderful week.
You as well.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. This was really interesting.
My pleasure. So that's what happens when we get to the next level. We studied Haftarah last year. We talked about the big picture. Now we can go bit by bit, some of the verses, and dig a little deeper. And next year we'll finish the rest of the Haftarah. There's a fascinating part of the Haftarah we didn't leave out, which is where Manoach tries to feed the Malach, tries to have a sacrifice and feed him.
Yeah,
And he says, I don't want food. What's going on there? What was Manoach thinking? Why is the angel couldn't be polite and just take his, play around on his plate? You don't want to eat something, you're still on your host. But what's going on in this whole second part? I have to deal with that next year.
Next one. Okay.
Nasso.
Okay.
All right,
All
take
right.
care.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Thank